My colleague Nicholas Comfort in Frankfurt has a story out now on Bloomberg, basically pointing out that a former risk manager, this guy Eric Ben Artsy, who according to FINRA records worked at Goldman previously and also had a stint at Citigroup, that he was the one who complained, and apparently also a couple others, that they were misvaluing these very complex derivatives trades they had, and that way they were able to avoid reporting losses that they should have if they had properly valued this. Now, it's a little bit of a he said, she said. So you've got these people, very smart, very well informed, saying they weren't properly valued. The bank is saying, no, we've investigated this. What we did was fine. It kind of gets into the how do you account for very complex positions in a period of extreme crisis? I mean, marking to market is sort of an art, isn't it?
Now, I have to say, I worked at Deutsche Bank during this time, specifically in their structured credit area. I do not have any extraordinary insights into this, but people who are involved in this is a very complicated area where you can't simply go to an outside source, a market partners, to mark your book here. These instruments can be put in vehicles that are in Germany, that are offshore, so you don't necessarily have to mark them like you would a simple corporate bond, and there's often a major disparity between the bid and the ask. That being said, since we started reading about this story, there are scores of people inside Deutsche Bank and outside that I've spoken to in the last 14 hours, those that have said Deutsche is finally going to get theirs here because they've always been up to no good, and others say no, they're simply involved in the most complicated products. This is how these things roll, but this is also why regulators say we shouldn't have complex derivatives if we really can't monitor them.
Right. I mean, as I say, it's an art. So is it the wise thing to do, as apparently these former employees were saying, to recognize essentially paper losses in the middle of a crisis that, you know, you have to wonder how good that would have been for the financial system?
There's no way Deutsche Bank could have sold this stuff anyway, right?
This is important.
Right.
If Deutsche Bank had to sell those positions at that time, it would be an insolvent bank,
game over,
just
game
like
over.
If they had to sell the Cosmopolitan Casino, but they didn't have to, so in hindsight, does it matter?
So, but then it comes down to, even if you're not selling it, how do you have to account for it on your books? And do you have to account for it, you know, based on the most extreme situation, or can you have a little rosier assumptions? This has always been a question on Wall Street, and obviously, a bank management, if they're going to look at a situation where it's like, if we look at the most extreme situation, our bank is probably going to fail. So maybe we don't do that. Maybe we look at a different scenario. They can be criticized for that, but they can also be applauded for it.
To your point, Christine, it seems to me that's why these allegations or accusations, if you prefer, are going to be so hard to prove unless they've got a paper trail leading all the way up to Anshu Jain, right? It's going to be very difficult to say Deutsche Bank intentionally, deliberately committed fraud because there is so much room for disagreement.
Right.
In a crisis, we're not talking about a normal stressed market. We're talking about a crisis, total, utter distress in which there's no liquidity, there's tons of leverage to begin with, tons of volatility to begin with, and then no liquidity. How do you know what these things are worth?
Right. I mean, unless these former employees can show that there's, you know, kind of clear line in accounting rules absolutely say this should have definitely been marked differently. And the problem with accounting rules is they leave a lot of room for judgment. So
it's a terrible thing, isn't it?
I do want to point out who regulates Deutsche Bank. Does this happen in Germany or is it here? Because if I'm a German regulator, how stringent am I on Germany's bank versus a UK regulator, a US regulator? Could Deutsche Bank reap the benefits from the fact that they're regulated from Germany and not here?
Well, I don't know these particular positions, whether they were overseen in the US or in the UK or in Germany. Accounting decisions also can be made in all those places. And as we know, there's different accounting conventions in Europe and in the US. Part of the issue the financial system faces is we have these giant global banks, which like to tell us that they're sort of one-stop shopping everywhere in the world. In fact, everywhere they operate, there are different rules, and that really became clear during the crisis. And regulators are starting to crack down and make each country's rules a little more different.